Welcome to a special mini-series of Diary of a Dreamer called Be the Change, where resilience, critical thinking, and everyday courage come together. I'm Tasha Eizinger, and in this series, we're exploring how ordinary people can create meaningful change. We'll talk about how to think clearly, engage responsibly, and take action in ways that truly make a difference. If you've ever wondered how to stay level-headed, raise resilient kids, participate in your community, and be a force for positive change, this series is for you. You can learn more about my work at tashaeizinger.com. Let's dive into today's conversation and explore how we can be the change. Today, we are with Colin William. He is a teaching professor in the Department of Psychological Services at Purdue University, which is my alma mater. So I'm so grateful to have you here, Colin. We met back in our Toastmaster days, and I was beyond impressed with your ability to articulate yourself well. And I also know that your background is really meaningful for this Be the Change series. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Tasha.
So we're going to start with explaining. I want you to explain the Psychological Services Department. You were telling me what your job role is. Can you explain what you do at Purdue as a teaching professor?
Yeah, so our department has faculty who are research faculty and faculty who are teaching faculty. And so as a teaching professor, I mostly teach the very large lecture halls for freshman and sophomore level classes. So I have 450 student classes of intro psych for a broad audience, and upper level classes in various domains, usually in the 250 to 300 seat range. And ours is a department that focuses on psychological science. And so that is our identity, is that we're, well, our graduates may go on to any number of different professions or graduate programs, that our identity is one that really focuses on the science of psychology.
Interesting. My dream is still to sit in on one of your classes. I bet it's so fascinating to hear you.
Well, my first class this fall will be Monday morning at 7:30 a.m. So that probably won't be, my freshmen probably won't be quite as enthusiastic as you.
No, you're going to really have to up your game to keep them showing up. Do the most ridiculous, absurd things you can, and they will probably be there.
Yes, we'll see if word gets around.
Wonderful. So part of this Be the Change series is helping people use their brains, stay grounded, maybe even look at things from a different perspective. And I would like to start with propaganda. And propaganda is all around us. And I would like you to explain how you define it, first of all.
Okay, so propaganda, I tend to think of, it's a pretty loaded word. It's one that's not just like, here's my opinion, but it's specifically oriented towards control. It's about population level control, individual level control, and it's control through information, or more accurately, incomplete information or deliberate misinformation. So it's generally bad faith in its underpinnings. Again, this is different from sort of like, two political parties have their differences of opinion on, say, tax policy. This is far more insidious about controlling populations through various mechanisms. It can, but primarily manipulative.
Yeah, and I feel like it's to invoke emotion, right? Mm-hmm. And actually, the Hunger Games, the last movie, they'd say, let's shoot a propaganda. And if people want to see kind of a simplified version of what that looks like, watch the movie and you'll understand what you're saying. Because it's to invoke emotion, which then makes even highly educated people more manipulated. Mm-hmm. So why is it then that we are all susceptible to it? If we know it exists, why are we so susceptible?
Yeah, it's a very important question because for we've now been in the internet era for 30 years. Propaganda, of course, existed way before that, and we've been in the social media era for 20 years. And unfortunately, we're now in the deep fake era, where information can be more easily faked. And so I often hear people say, well, we need to teach better information literacy in schools. But as you note, even highly educated people, people with college degrees, people with graduate degrees fall for this. It's not that people don't necessarily have the tools to recognize that propaganda is coming at them. There's a lot more that goes into it than that. And so, part of the question is, people have the skills, why don't they use them? Part of that, especially for educated people, can be overconfidence. I am a smart person, therefore I know, right? And I
It's like
can tell
in
that.
your sentence.
Yes. I am too smart to fall for this sort of thing. And but a lot starts with the media sources that you choose. And those media sources, part of propaganda is they speak with high degrees of confidence. You are psychologically buying into them just by giving them your time and attention. And by buying into it, you're buying into their confidence, and you, as an educated person, then become overconfident in what you've just heard. It's manipulated you at the level of emotion. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel right. And then as you become overconfident in your belief, then you can become confident in clicking that button to share and broadcast it to others. So now it has your authority on it as well. But there's also a matter of motivation here. You have to want to check the information that you're hearing. And if that information, if that propaganda, if that source is telling you you're right, and look how great it is to be right, you're not going to be inclined to go check if it's true. You might not be inclined to go check if it's true because that carries the risk of finding out that it's not. And then you feel bad. But it's also that fact checking takes time, right? We're often looking at this stuff just during an idle moment. You've dropped off your kid for this story time at the library, and now you've got half an hour to kill, and like, oh, I'm just going to doom scroll through here. You're not sitting there saying, ooh, that's interesting, now I'm going to fact check this on my phone. So that takes work as well. And so that combination of overconfidence, not wanting to find out that you're wrong, the authoritative tone of the propaganda, all lends itself well towards not actually doing the fact checking that needs to be done. And so it's a tough environment to be someone who's trying to communicate reality, because I often tell my students when I'm talking about Freud in class, me, not a fan. And, I'm communicating like psychological science. Freud tells a much more fun story. And science is often more mundane. It's fascinating to someone, to me, but it's not fascinating to others. Propaganda is just the same. It tells a much more fun story. It tells a much more engaging story, whereas the reality is often much more boring and mundane. And so it can be really hard for people to step back and recognize all of that that's going on, even if once you step back, it's actually really obvious.
Yeah. And you're right. It is more dramatic and exciting when it's sensationalized and you feel these big feelings, whether you feel enraged or very confident, like, oh, it confirmed everything I believe. I knew I was right and everybody was wrong. So it is much more exciting, right? And we kind of get into this drama loop almost. So what are some ways we can check ourselves? Because that's what I'm hearing is we must take personal responsibility, because there's teams of people putting all of this propaganda together.
Sure.
But we need to take personal responsibility. So what are some clues or things that we can ask ourselves to keep ourselves in check?
Yeah, these are sort of the beginnings of building better habits. Because as you say, we have the responsibility, right? If you take something and immediately reshare it on your social media, you are broadcasting to an audience, and you owe that audience your respect. And sharing something that is false with your audience is a profoundly disrespectful thing to do. You really need to be in the habit of checking it. But the habits, developing good habits, starts with breaking the old ones. And the first habit that again, it's easy to fall into. I can feel this in any given moment. Is you see that thing and you get immediately angry and self-righteous, and then you sort of stop thinking in that moment. So really the most important thing that we can do in those moments is just pause and let yourself calm down, because one of the tells for propaganda is that it is triggering an emotion, and usually outrage, anger, things like that. And if you can step back for just a moment and see that that's what's happening, if you can feel it in yourself and feel like, oh, here's what's happening, right? I'm no longer operating as a rational human being. That is a really good starting point. Now, again, that then gives you the moment to take a breath, because here's the truth that we all have to acknowledge. Nothing bad will happen if you don't reshare that thing right now.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, I know. All your friends need to know
Immediately.
Yes.
That's such common sense advice, but you're right.
Yes.
Take a moment.
And I hate to admit this, but we're not actually, as individual citizens, we want to be educated, but at the same time, we're not the ones making the decisions. So we don't actually have to just make up our minds right now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, maybe you're just sitting there in a waiting room somewhere scrolling and feeling that emotion. You want to step back from that. You want to catch that emotion in the moment and realize that was deliberate on the part of the propagandist. That's what they wanted. Now, you as a regular everyday person can either take it on yourself to try and do some fact checking if this is important to you. Or you can just say, I don't have the time for that, and I'm not going to let this become part of my thinking right now. If you don't have the time to fact check, if you don't have the time to seek out authoritative sources, that's fine. We have lives to lead. But you have to admit to yourself that the cost of that is that you're not going to be an authority on it yourself.
Yeah.
Now, one of the other tells for propaganda is that they often are not telling you what their sources are. They are not providing you the ability to go check their work. And so if you are inclined towards fact checking and you're not finding sources listed within this this article that you've read or being provided by this streaming video that you're watching, that's a red flag as well, because either maybe they're just like, we don't think that providing sources are important. But all the time, I find that I often get people posting in my social media feed stuff about this new psychological study, and it always sounds suspicious to me because I'm a psych professor, and I'm like, well, we tend to not draw big conclusions like that all the time. But when I go back to the source, I can find the more circumspect wording of the source material. So it is with propaganda as well. If they are not providing sources, then they are not respecting you, and that means you don't need to respect them. You can say, oh, maybe this is something, maybe I'll check it later when I have the time. But if you're not able to find a non-propagandistic source for that information, that's a sign that you need to tread really warily about that. And sometimes, it can be easy for some people to devote an hour to going down a rabbit hole to fact check something. But, we live in the era of having all sorts of information and misinformation at our fingertips. if you can, at least find a credible source in like 2 minutes, then that's a sign, like, be wary. Yeah, don't necessarily let it go. If it's an issue that's important to you, that might matter. But if a quick 2-minute check is not finding an authoritative source that is not a clear propaganda source, that's probably a red flag.
And that's so simple to do, right? We pause, feel what sensations are you feeling in your body? That's a clue. 2-minute fact check.
Yep.
For sources. Like, this is something we can all do. It's like less than 5 minutes.
Right. And again, none of it, if you can't find something in 2 minutes, it doesn't necessarily mean the thing is false. It just means you don't need to internalize this as something I need to be outraged and angry about and reshare right now.
That's great. One of my really big concerns that I'm seeing is how fear, anger, outrage, everything that's just so big makes people much more easily manipulated.
Yep.
How does that work in our brain? I understand it in very basic terms, that it turns off certain parts of our brain, basically. But can you explain, how does that make us more easily manipulated? And we need to be mindful of controlling our emotions more.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously emotion is a powerful factor, and negative emotions can have a particular power. They get into sort of evolutionary defense mechanisms, things like that. But also at sort of a cognitive level, there's some interesting patterns of cognitive biases. One of them is that humans are often characterized more by loss aversion than they are by the pursuit of gain. That is, we in competitive environments, we're more protective of what we already have and more scared of losing what we have than we are of pursuing something that's even better. This is probably something that differentiates like the best athletes who don't choke under pressure and things like that. Propaganda is often built on the fear and outrage of loss. You are going to lose this freedom. You are going to lose your job. You are going to lose your status within society. And so it's preying very much on the loss aversion bias in human cognition. And that can have a very strong effect on us. Right? It's because we often bemoan that we don't have a more positive politics in our country, but part of that is because the fear of loss is more powerful than the look what we can accomplish together, or look how we can make a better country, for instance. And so threatening loss can be a powerful element of getting people's attention. Here's how it's going to affect you as an individual. But then we find that these manipulations are often very tribal in nature, right? We're social beings. We exist in our social bubbles. We exist in our social tribes. And so often it is framed, this loss, this anger and outrage is triggered not just in terms of you are going to lose this aspect of what matters to you, but we are going to lose. And so then what you get is a collective anger, a collective outrage. And this can become self-reinforcing and self-perpetuating. You're talking with other people, through social media or most often, who agree with you, who are also scared and outraged and angry about these things. And there's a concept in social psychology of group polarization. Okay. And group polarization is the idea that when you get people together who largely agree on something, A lot of this has been studied in like mock jury situations. Like if you get 12 people together in a mock jury and give them details of a trial, if you interview them individually and all 12 are like, yeah, I sort of lean towards thinking this person is guilty. Once they all start talking with each other, their positions intensify. It goes from I think this person's probably guilty to I know this person's guilty, and their the sentence that they might have considered as an individual becomes much more extreme when discussed as a group. So it happens with this collective anger. I'm scared about this thing. I'm scared about this thing too. We're scared together. We are scared for ourselves. And this validates each other, right? My anger validates this person's anger. This person's anger validates my anger. And so our anger and our outrage become more intensified.
And we're justified in it because
Yes.
I'm not alone. I'm not the only one.
Right. Exactly so. So these mechanisms can really contribute towards magnifying those mechanisms of loss aversion and how they drive fear and anger and outrage.
Okay, so how do we protect ourselves from that, of becoming this mob mentality of we're in it together and we're outraged together, so we are totally justified in this?
Yeah. So one of the things that you want to do there is, to the extent possible, in 2026, get yourself offline a little, because a lot of where we see this group polarization mentality is in social media bubbles, and specifically with social media algorithms. So there was an interesting study just published in February, I think. They gathered data a few years ago, and they had people in this study engaging with one of the major social media platforms. And for one group, they were to engage with the chronological feed, and one group was to engage with the algorithmic feed. And they found that those who engaged with the algorithmic feed, that their political attitudes became more hardened over time, because the algorithm detects what you're engaging with and feeds you more of that.
So dangerous.
Yes. So trying to engage more with a chronological feed than an algorithmic feed is sort of a practical thing to consider within your social media consumption. But also, when I say get offline, I don't think that we can live in a completely offline environment in 2026. But being more deliberate in your media information propaganda consumption is hugely important. You're younger than me. I grew up in an era where media consumption was like, maybe we had the radio on in the background, but otherwise the news was on at this time, and the newspaper came out in the morning. And yes, we weren't as immediately informed, but media consumption was more a choice in a moment than deliberate, and more deliberate. Whereas now it's just coming at us from all directions. And so we're constantly outraged, and one of the main delivery mechanisms is those social media feeds. Mm-hmm. And so once you start engaging with that, you become more immersed in like-minded opinions, because that's what the algorithms are feeding you. And you're being, and of course in social media, you're more prey towards the loudest people, because the people who are more nuanced and circumspect are probably not sharing their opinions every time something comes out.
Right. So
that's an important aspect. And the more that you engage with people in person, the more you find that that you're not engaging in that domain, in that way of anger. I once upon a time would participate in online discussion boards for baseball.
Okay.
And
that got heated.
Huh?
I bet that got heated, didn't it?
Oh my gosh. You would say, you say things in the online environment that you would never say to a human being. The kind of things that you would say in an online environment. If I were talking to some person on the street and they expressed an opinion I disagreed with about, say, the manager of my baseball team, I would never say, wow, you are the dumbest in the world for saying that. But online, like,
You have your protective shield of armor called the computer.
yes, exactly. And it depersonalizes and it dehumanizes when it's online. So, and it caricatures, right? You're only getting the most extreme opinions, but you're getting them thrown at you all the time. And that can contribute, that again, that gets you considering that extremity. But those things you're hearing, even from other people you trust, they're probably getting them from propaganda.
Absolutely. So what I'm hearing is we need to have conversations with people,
Yes.
like
Yes.
genuine conversations,
Mhm.
face to face versus a computer screen.
Yes.
And I do think it's really important for us to learn to question ourselves.
Yes.
It's so important. So can you talk a little bit, like describe what cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias are, so that way we're all on the same page, and then I'll have some questions about that.
Yeah. I mean, this idea of questioning ourselves is obvious when we step back from being ourselves, right? Like any given opinion I might have, I'm just like, yeah, I dig me, I'm so right. And then if someone were to ask me, hey, Colin, of all the opinions that you've held in your life, what percentage do you think were correct? I'd have to be the world's most arrogant individual to say, oh, 100%, absolutely. So it's obvious.
90% would be probably not accurate.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, when you think about it that way, you're like, oh yeah, I've been wrong before. I am very likely wrong about things right now, and that demands a little humility. So, to the concepts that you ask about there, so cognitive dissonance. This goes back to, I think this was a term coined in the 1950s. Cognitive dissonance is a state of tension that exists in an individual when we realize in a moment that we either hold two conflicting beliefs, or we hold a belief that conflicts with our behaviors. Mm-hmm. We don't like existing in that state of tension. And so cognitive dissonance theory says that we need to either change a belief, change the behavior, or somehow rationalize away the tension that exists there.
So quick question then. So an emotion then that would be cognitive dissonance would be guilt. I did something that doesn't align with my beliefs of who I want to be, so I feel guilty. Would that be accurate?
Yes, exactly. So to give you an example from the social media world in which we live, you've got friends who will share something on social media and it's false. And, I'm that guy who might actually tell them it's false and provide them a source that says that it's false. So I've now, if they listen to me, not a given, but if they listen to me, I've now put them into a state of cognitive dissonance. Okay. I think of myself as a good and smart person. I shared something that was false and wrong. Those two things are in conflict. I might be experiencing that guilt that you just described. Your options there are, you can't change the behavior because you already did the behavior. You can't go back in time and change the behavior. You can admit you were wrong.
That's great.
Yeah, you can admit that you were wrong, or what you see many people doing in this situation is they rationalize. They rationalize like, well, what does it say about the other side that this was plausible, that this could be true? Now, the fault is on you for sharing something that you didn't check, but now you've rationalized your bad behavior by blaming the other side, and you have reduced your cognitive dissonance. I am still a good person.
You're either going to give up or you're going to dig in.
Right, exactly so. So that's a cognitive dissonance reduction. That's an example of how we see it in our everyday social media world. And then you also asked about confirmation bias, one of the most powerful forces in human cognition. Confirmation bias is our tendency to want to confirm that what we believe is true, rather than taking the risk of finding out that what we believe is false. And this has all sorts of implications in our everyday life. It's a powerful and dangerous force, for instance, in medical diagnosis. You want a doctor who, when they make their initial diagnosis, is not only seeking out symptoms that will confirm their diagnosis, but also checking things that might disconfirm their diagnosis, that might tell them that they're wrong. And if your doctor is strongly influenced by confirmation bias, they may miss the symptoms that actually tell them their diagnosis is incorrect. And of course, confirmation bias is a really powerful force in our everyday life. I use an example in class. There's an interesting question in sort of evolutionary psychology about why did human beings evolve reason as an ability?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Did we evolve reason to solve problems, or did we evolve reason to win arguments? So to give you an idea of how you can tell the difference between these two, if we think about a time when you found out you were wrong about something, right?
Yeah, so good.
Right. See, that's the thing.
Good.
If we evolved reason to solve problems, then that should be a triumphant moment, right? That should be a moment like, wow, I was wrong before. I have more information now. I am now better equipped to solve problems. Woohoo! I am a better problem solver now. But yeah, what you describe is exactly so. I found out I was wrong. That stings, because being right and wrong has value to us as individuals. Feeling right or wrong has value to us as individuals. And so confirmation bias, it shapes so much of what's problematic about our current state of being. We have people who choose media sources that are quite obviously propagandistic.
Both sides.
Yes,
Right?
exactly so. Yeah, I could name them across the spectrum here, and that are all there to trap you into their media environment, to sell you ads in their media environment, by telling you that you're right all the time. And people will tune in. And yeah, if you were to step back, you'd be like, yeah, they're kind of full of it, but they're full of it on my side. Whereas if you were to go find a more objective source, you'd be at risk of finding out that you are wrong. And we have all of these beliefs, especially our partisan political beliefs, where anytime that we're hearing people tell us something from outside our bubble, we're listening, but generally not for a purpose of learning, but as defense attorneys for our own belief systems, right? We are listening with the purpose of then saying, "I object, Your Honor," and stepping in and saying, "No, this can't possibly be correct." And so it's an extremely powerful force. We're all vulnerable to it, and we've got to and they interact with each other. Confirmation bias can help us reduce our cognitive dissonance at times, and so we've got to really be careful about these very powerful forces. And I know there are plenty of people out there who are like, I am cold and rational and above all that human emotion stuff. That's a human emotion. That is, you have a stake in believing that too. And you are avoiding information that tells you that you have emotional stakes in these things too.
You're protecting your ego.
Yeah, exactly. We are human. This is how we operate.
Yes, that's interesting. I definitely could talk to you probably all day about this, but I want us to close it down by talking about how we can utilize critical thinking skills. That's a term that gets thrown around. Oh, I used my critical thinking skills. And then I start questioning, well, what were their sources? Nope, it's confirmation bias. They're
Right.
just finding the information to reinforce what they already believe. That is not critical thinking skills.
Right.
So you've already hit on having conversations with people, pausing, doing a 2-minute, like search a little bit, find some sources, being probably sources that come from places that maybe you even disagree with. That could be healthy. But what are some ways that we can utilize critical thinking skills in a healthy way to keep ourselves in check and help us regulate our emotions?
Yeah, critical thinking is sort of an interesting concept when it comes to our everyday life. Because we can't exist in a perpetual state of skepticism and doubt about everything. At some point, you have to accept some amount of, I believe this about reality. But critically thinking allows you to find those moments when skepticism or being critical might be more warranted.
Okay.
We are, countless situations in a day where somebody tells us something and there's no obvious reason why they would lie to us, why they would be, trying to manipulate us. And so, we can accept those and just sort of move on with our lives. But the main driver of good critical thinking skills is first and foremost, the desire and the willingness and the openness to actually use them. It's to that pausing and stepping back. Critical thinking in the age of the internet and increasingly with AI things on the internet is incredibly difficult. The odds that you will immediately find a source online that is obvious and true are dwindling. And
but they should be getting bigger and better, right?
I know. It's here we had the promise of first the internet and then the iPhone, the entirety of human knowledge in your pocket. Wow, that's so great. Except it's all polluted, and that pollution has multiple different ways that it makes things difficult. First of all, it puts a lot of information out there that is simply false. But two, it casts doubt on that which is not false. It creates a climate of doubt. And that's part of what propagandists want, right? They want some population who will believe them, but they want another part of the population not knowing what to believe. Either way, the propagandists win because you can no longer accept certainty that they are wrong.
Not good.
Yes, and so and then again, there's the third part, which I've already alluded to, which is that actually doing fact checking takes time. So in an everyday world where, I have kids, you have kids, we have lives, we have jobs, some of us have podcasts. Where are you going to find the time to do all that? It's a lot to take on yourself to do all that, to actually go out and be an active, I am critically researching. But critical thinking doesn't require that you be an active critical researcher. It can require that in the moment you say, okay, I see these red flags, triggering of emotion, lack of sources, but I'm not going to take it at face value. And that's a starting point.
That's a really good starting point. Just that alone, I think, could solve a lot of problems.
Yes. And practically speaking, what you really want to do, if you want to go beyond that, if you want to still be able to take in information in everyday life, is do an honest personal inventory of your information sources. You maybe don't have the time to fact check every article that you read, but if one of your sources is constantly feeding you articles that are emotion-based without citing informational sources, that's a sign to just chuck that information source. And you may have to do some legwork to find alternative information sources that are not doing this obviously bad stuff. And you may have to admit to yourself that some of the sources you've relied on for years maybe weren't optimal. But if you're willing to do an honest, critical evaluation of your sources, right? Again, not necessarily critically evaluating every individual article or video or whatever that they do, but a critical evaluation of your sources. That can be a starting point towards moving you into consuming sort of a better, more curated source of information.
Better journalism.
Yes. Yeah, actual journalism. Yeah, I mean, I know that journalism takes a bad rap, and unfortunately, its business model is in real trouble right now. But there are still outlets that send people out to see what's going on the ground, and that has value. Having somebody report back to you, here's what's actually going on here. Now, again, there are propagandistic sources that are doing that as well. You're going to have to be honest with yourself about whether the sources that you're relying on truly are informational sources, or if they are using emotion to keep you hooked and keep you coming back.
Yeah, that drama loop.
Yes.
That's a personal term. I don't think that's a true term.
No, but I like the term because it captures a lot of what comes from our information environment. I mean, I don't know about you. I don't have notifications on my phone for sources like this, but people who have notifications on for news information or from propagandistic sources are constantly being bombarded by this stuff all the time. They are in that drama loop. They're in that dopamine loop of what is the novelty that I'm experiencing here? What is going to be the next rush that I am getting? And you've got to, yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah. And so turning off those notifications can be a part of how you curate your information environment and make it less propagandistic.
You know, there's a few sources that I really like that I feel confident is not rooted in propaganda. I want everybody to do their own research on this, but I like 1440 Digest. It's an email.
Okay.
I like The Flip Side. It talks about what both sides of the aisle are saying, so you can form your own opinion based on actual quotations. And Jordan is my lawyer. She has a podcast called Unbiased.
Okay.
And it's interesting. She said, depending on who is in office, is who she's accused of supporting. Because if she's a Republican, they think that she's a Democrat. When she's a Democrat, they think she's a Republican. So anyways, I really think she tries very hard. I don't think any of these sources are perfect, but I think those are good starting points for people to look into, because I don't like the emotional aspect of propaganda because it's too heavy. It's too much. I don't have time to deal with it. Or it's not sustainable.
But if you've become hooked on the drama loop, to use your phrase, it can take some time to wean yourself off of that, because the sources that are a little bit more objective are going to be less emotional, less evocative. And they're not going to spend all their time telling you that you're right. And so that can, for someone going cold turkey on propaganda, and now I'm just going to consume information and be like, oh, this is not stimulating at all. That's a feature. It's not a bug. It's the stimulation is the problem.
So what would be their patch to help them get through it? Setting a timer on their phone? I don't know.
I would say, for me, it would be like, okay, I'm going to get all of my emotional stimulation through sports news, and I'm just going to take that, and I'm going to let myself be a fan. But, rather than a fan of my political team, I'm just going to be a fan of a sports team, or a fan of an athlete, or a fan of cat videos, or, anything like that. Like, try to get your emotions from other sources, and try to get them from positive sources, emotions that are evoking, like, oh, this makes me happy. This brings me joy.
So okay, I know I said that the last question was the last question. I'm a liar. But so is the fact that anger and negative emotions are more addictive than the happy emotions because of what you said, the aversion?
Loss aversion. Yeah.
Loss aversion? Is that why? I
wouldn't use the term addictive, but they can be more attention getting.
Okay.
Sorry. So you said, is that why?
Because people like if happy emotions were more attention getting, then propaganda would be based on making us feel happy, right? But people, if they could choose between something that makes them angry or scared or whatever, there are people who I would think most people would choose that sensationalized thing versus like the warm feel good, like, oh, I loved that. It makes me so happy. Is that because of the fear of loss is greater than the gain?
I think
That oversimplified.
there's part of that going on. I mean, it is an interesting question. Why don't we choose the things that make us feel good as opposed to the things that make us feel bad? We see by people's choices what they're choosing.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone. Again, some people, their social media feed is all like cat
Yeah.
videos and things like that. But there's the open question as to what feels good. What is a positive emotion? Joy is a positive emotion we should aspire to. But again, feeling right feels good.
Yeah.
And so being outraged simultaneously can compel you to come back to that source because they're telling me what I need to be scared of, while also making you feel good in a very sort of self-righteous way.
Interesting.
And especially those more conspiratorial propaganda sites it's not just like I feel right, but I know something others don't, and that feels special. And
Addictive.
yes, that's addictive.
Solves crime.
And there, there's a whole domain of study into how people fall into this sort of thing, into these conspiracy mindset, a lot of it based in research into cults and the like.
Mhm.
But dangling just enough information where people then fill in the blanks themselves, connect the dots themselves, empowers them. And so even when we're in a domain of largely negative emotions, there are things that feel positive to the person who's receiving the propaganda. It makes them feel good to feel like they're on the inside, or that they know things others don't, or I feel I feel right. And I feel right in comparison to you, who is clearly wrong. So I feel socially superior to you.
Well, you certainly are. I mean, that's all it takes. Oh my. So truly, to wrap it up this time, I want you to think about like a generalization of what do you want people to hear from this episode? If they could take away something valuable to improve their life, what is the thing that they really need to take away?
Oh, interesting. Well, certainly just the idea of pausing and not letting your emotions control your media in consumption is an important one. But I would say just remember that a lot of this is just not healthy. We are it's not healthy to just be bombarded by notifications. It's not healthy to be looking at your fellow people and hating them on the basis of propaganda that you have consumed. It's not healthy to be spending your time staring at your phone rather than engaging with the world around you. And none of this is necessary. You can be an informed individual without constantly consuming information. You can be an informed individual who also, removes that social media app from your phone so that it's not a temptation for you all the time. You can be an informed individual who learns about this thing 6 hours after it happens rather than the moment that it happens. All of these, we are people living our everyday lives. We have elected leaders that we expect to be doing things, and some of them do better jobs and some of them do worse jobs. But there is nothing that compels us to be as involved in all of this as them. And if we take that sense of everything is urgent all the time out of our everyday lives, then we can slow down and consume information in a more deliberate manner, in a more controlled manner, and not subject ourselves to that drama all the time. To not live our lives as if we are all 320 million members of Congress, or just
Yes.
and to actually focus on living our lives. That should be the priority. To be an informed individual is important. To be an informed citizen is important. It just doesn't require that you spend all 16 hours that you're awake every day being informed all the time. And if we can get to that place where we accept that we can live our lives and then are more deliberate in how we take in information, and be willing to abandon those sources that are clearly manipulating us, that clearly have contempt for us through their behaviors, then I think we can live with a little bit more sanity.
I agree. And then with sanity, we can actually create real change if we live
Yes.
intentionally.
Yes, living with the people around us,
Yeah.
engaging with the people around us in ways that is based on real and authentic interaction, rather than the caricature that is being presented on social media. That's important.
Thank you so much for being here. I hope that everybody who listens chooses to live more intentionally, take some time to reflect and ask, how can I be and do better? And I think you gave really insightful tips that anybody can apply. So I hope they choose to do it.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This was a delightful conversation, Tasha.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Be the Change, a mini-series on Diary of a Dreamer. My hope is that these conversations leave you feeling more informed, more confident in your ability to think critically, and more empowered to contribute positively in your own community. Real change doesn't come from reacting quickly. It comes from thoughtful people who are willing to stay curious, ask good questions, and take meaningful action. If this episode encouraged you, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who values thoughtful conversations and positive change. You can learn more about my work and find additional resources at tashaeizinger.com. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep learning, and remember, each of us has the power to be the change.